This is Tom Duty, middle-aged American living in New Jersey near the Lincoln Tunnel. If you were to visit my website, you would type Howdy Doody into Google. You'll find the correct spelling of the famous puppet. You then combine Tom Duty in a Google search from my site. Topic of this slide presentation will be share stories and pictures of my summer vacation with my wife, Hannah. In modern times with internet and social media, I feel like overreach to strangers and underreach to family. So the target audience of this slideshow includes Mary Lou and Helene people, descendants, mothers and fathers of descendants, Bill and Martha people, descendants, mothers and fathers of descendants, Jane and Helen people, descendants, mothers and fathers of descendants. Now on Hana's side, Matsumoto people, Hana's mother in Lombardia, Italy, Como, Italy, Lake Como, including Matsumoto people in Tokyo and Los Angeles and Singapore. Miyajima people with Hajime and Rosa in Italy. Tokyo, Japan, and Kobe, Japan. Now, of these family groups of family with Hana's side and my side, the head count of those unknown locations is by far the largest in the Miyajima people. So if I'm reaching Miyajima people, given the reproducibility of the grandparent Miyajima and the sea horizons as a likely place to locate, like Hana's late father, Miyajima people, you could be all over this planet. To you, a special note. Now the first pictures begin with a lobster on this ornamental warehouse in a tourist area. It's on a sidewalk in a tourist area. The main license plate, again, lobster. The craftily folded towels by the hotel staff. The buoys hanging from a tree. The roadside lobster shack, plus its kitchen, its outdoor kitchen, pine cones, shipyard beer, a special beer called Peeper, and a final picture in this segment of blueberry soda. Now looking closely at the lobster painted on the ornamental lighthouse, in one of its pinchers it has a woman, and this is made to have the lobster like King Kong, the Beauty and the Beast. It's obviously creative single artist inspiration, and he or she created this and had the good fortune of a commission in a public space. Now, in addition to that, then the next slide is the license plate. Again, the lobster theme, in this case, institutionalized state government. The lobster, 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 and then it's there again and again. The shipyard beer was the first beer that I had in Maine, and I asked for the one beer, any one beer that would get me a beer inside to match the glass. Shipyard was that one from a long list of beer on the menu, and Shipyard turned out to be the most available label consistently throughout my stay. Peeper was the best beer of my stay, also local. And then finally this blueberry soda, which was not terribly sweet and really tasty and available in a variety of different variations throughout the stay. Just roughly compared Maine to Hawaii. In Hawaii, the products are not local. When you get the local products, they're specialty products in small distribution, and they're just not everywhere. What you do get is the same labels that I would get in New York and New Jersey. So Maine is truly different in that way. The local products are sold with pride, and they're in abundance, and they're everywhere, and they're not all of them are good. Some of the beer, blueberry beer, okay, I'm not a proponent of blueberry beer, but nonetheless they have it. Someone's drinking it, and it's available in a lot of places. Really a nice touch. Like a collection of local products makes the place feel warmer, homier, different, more exotic. The modern suspension bridge along the drive has two towers, and one of the towers is an observation deck. Now, to me, it's remarkable that more states haven't done this. This is state and federal funding, and they said, we're going to build these two towers. It's a beautiful scene. It's crossing a river. It's a gorgeous valley, an opportunity to look up the river and down the river, up the valley and down the valley. Why not put an observation deck on one of the two towers? Brilliant idea, first time I've seen it. The mannequin in the window of a store. This is Peru, exclusively Peru products for not Peru people. The promotional and the models and the photographs also in the windows were all Caucasian, white people, and no one that looks like my Peru friends. Yet high fashion Peru wear, very complimentary of the products that people are buying in Bar Harbor. Now this picture with pine trees on the left side, I am walking away from the camera. I'm the human that's closest in the foreground with a minivan midway, and on the horizon is water to the left and an island on the right. That is the sandbar that Bar Harbor is named after. That sandbar connects Bar Island with the greater island, which also includes the city of the town of Bar Harbor. And that sandbar covers in the cycle of high tide to low tide. The white minivan is the rental for Hannah and I. On the left, bicycles. On the right, no, on the left, pedaling watercrafts, and on the right, bicycles. So the watercrafts, they have the river canoes and sea kayaks, and people are using both. Now, the point in this picture for me is just to illustrate the local recreational appetite. Renting bicycles, hiking. Our hotel had loan umbrellas, binoculars, walking sticks. Now, I first became aware of these telescoping aluminum ski pole-like walking sticks. Trekkers would use them in a right hand and a left hand, and these were Germans in Italy. This was a recreational area, and the Germans just loved these poles. Well, now I see them again, and I haven't seen any Germans. A lot of Russians on this trip in Bar Harbor, but no Germans. Anyways, the recreational appetite, the willingness to spend the budget, the economy on recreational gear, rental bikes, bicycles, hiking boots. Patagonia is there. It is big. For a small town, it's very big. Now this picture of the lilies and the frogs, this picture I think has 3 frogs. Now this picture illustrates the difference between my curatorial efforts and Hannah's. Hannah has a tendency for social media to choose prettier pictures, the best pictures. And so people who want to flip through pretty pictures, Hannah's Instagram or Hannah's Facebook is a great place to see pictures like this, only many more of them and better pictures. This one, I took a more distant view of the frogs because it shows the environment that they're in a little bit better. The scratch tree inspired me to ask rangers what scratched the tree. Black bear, it could be, but they simply didn't know. There are wood shavings at the bottom that shows it was scratched away by an animal, but what animal is unknown. The dead trees, this is a fascinating scene that we came upon by chance. They were obviously live trees, probably not too long ago. And why it's such a mass amount of trees that were obviously growing out of water, on dry land, are suddenly in water and dead, was a mystery to us. But a ranger named Claire, who taught us a few other really interesting things, explained what's happened there is a beaver has dammed the river and flooded a significant amount of land. Now, she didn't know how long ago this happened, but you can guess it's probably a decade ago. Oh, actually, she did say a decade, 2 decades ago. It takes a long time for the water to fill up and the trees to die. This is another example of the exotic flora of the area. Rosa rugosa, a competent gardener and professional serving the visitors of the national park, told us it is commonly called a sea rose or beach rose, and it's considered an invasive species by the park system, so they don't grow it. However, it's common and planted by humans in gardens, and especially along homes that have seafront property. Now, the wildland with the ridge that runs from high on the left of the frame to low on the right of the frame with a rock in the middle, that's called bubble rock. And if one were to get close to it, it's certainly bigger than any car on the road, and it hangs what appears to be precariously on the ridge, like it'll roll down any moment, and it's been there for tens of thousands of years. So here's a note for very athletic, in your prime, no young children along climbers, hikers, trekkers. Bubble rock is advanced. Precipice trail is also advanced. You can park your car along the Park Loop Road and climb up to these places, and they are truly, these would, in a ski comparison, these would be double diamonds. Hannah and I would never climb this level of challenge. This is me sitting on yoga blocks. These are 2 ordinary foam purchased at Target yoga blocks. I fasten them together and carry them. There's a similar style that Hannah has. And if Hannah took a picture of every time I sat on it, it would literally be hundreds of pictures. There are times we would have our food from the grocery store that would be with us on our tours, and this is where we'd have our lunch, sitting on our yoga blocks. And it's especially good with COVID because we don't have to consider a picnic table or a bench that might attract and accumulate other people and get in the way of social distancing. We can sit exactly where we want to, and we used them many, many times. Now, listeners, you have to look close at this picture. It's my back walking through some tall pine trees, and you will see a pair of shoes in my left hand and a pair of shoes in my right hand. So I am barefoot by choice. Hannah is barefoot through marital pressure. I love walking on the fallen pine needles, and the forest floor in Maine are carpeted with pine needles, and it's absolutely wonderful. The picture of me attempting to look lifeless, laying on rocks, I did maybe 5 different variations of this. This is called Middle-Aged Man Finds Something to Do with His Time, while his wife is taking pictures of the pretty spots that we'd see. In some ways, this is a typical roadside stop. Typical in that you can get ice cream. Not typical in that you can't get all the local products like blueberries. What's different about this is it's owned by an Italian man, and outside it's a little more aesthetically decorated with these boxes that are upside down, and inside there are 2 Vespa Italian motorbikes. This picture is the capital of Maine. It's in Augusta, Maine, and that's pronounced just like the Augusta, Georgia, the more famous Augusta, at least more famous from my perspective. And this capital was remarkable to me. So before I make this statement, I'm going to include my capital city visit resume. Foreign capitals include Japan and Canada. U.S. capitals include the nation's capital, of course, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Colorado, Tennessee, Maryland, California, Minnesota, Louisiana, and this state capital is surrounded by less city than any of the capitals I've been to by far. I have a lot of family in Milwaukee. Harley Davidson here is for you, especially Phil Halley. I know you like this one. Now Hannah at a picnic table eating lobster. I'm already finished. My hands are clean and I've stepped back from the table. The person most credited for teaching me how to eat lobster taught me by teaching me how to eat crab. And the interesting thing about it is you get good at it in a hurry. Hannah, this is our third lobster, and she's already good at it. The only thing you can produce with a little more experience is speed, and speed is not the game. Enjoying and thoroughness is rewarded. So here I'm declaring, you will see Hannah, third eating of lobster, already expert status. Now the picture of Hannah and I are in masks. We have just as many pictures, probably more, of us not wearing masks. And when we're taking a selfie, Hannah will say, take your mask off, and I'll say, put your mask on. Hannah has a tendency to wear hers on her chin, and mine is more likely to be on all the time. Now the picture of the whiteboard and the tattoo go together. The whiteboard is the schedule for the ferry, and the man's right leg has a lacrosse stick tattooed on it. He is the ferry captain's first mate. Now at first glance, Hannah thought this was a lobster, which is why I asked the first mate if I could take the picture as we got off the boat, but it turns out it's a lacrosse stick. Now the artist. So the next card is a business that the details are there. Listeners, if you want the details, you can pause and get them. Patrick is the owner. Absolutely, I love to talk about art, but very quickly, art gets into arrogance and attitude and what you know, and it becomes a very boring conversation very fast. Never happened with Patrick. This man is fascinating, knowledgeable. You can tell he's not an artist, or he's not showing his own artwork anyways, and didn't talk about his own work if he is an artist, but instead you can just tell he has a sincere appreciation of art and artists, and he and his wife are in this business together. And of the people I've talked to about art, Patrick is number one. He's my favorite. The special note about Patrick is he's super overweight, and that helped me. It's like this guy, artists tend to be a little more fashionable in their dress and appearance themselves, and people who are appealing to artists tend to be more fashionable and trim in their own way. Patrick's not playing that game. Patrick is humble, knowledgeable, and 100% authentic appreciator of art. And I truly enjoyed the conversation. Hope it can continue. Now what looks like a brick wall and Hannah laying in the middle of a road, those two pictures go together. The one with Hannah laying on the center line of the road, first of all, there are no cars on that road. It's bicycles only. There are concrete barriers on either end of that road, and Hannah is laying there safely. I'm also watching for bicycles. If you imagine Hannah laying, listeners, if you imagine Hannah laying there and using the iPhone pano from right to left, that's how the other one is created. So what looks like a wall is actually the underside of the arch of the bridge. Now in the final four pictures, I'll talk about how these moments of the travel related to COVID. The first scene is a bar called Dog and Pony. And Dog and Pony, of course, is this old circus phrase that kind of captures this idea of craziness. Well, COVID is not a dog and pony drunken bar craziness. Listeners, if you were to look closely, you would see little ropes tied around trees attached to poles that are in Home Depot buckets. This literally separates customers from one another. You are instructed to keep your mask on while walking around. While coming up to the table to get your order, there is no table service. They clean the table only after people have left, before the next people arrive. And so that's one example of the many relatively strict local Bar Harbor interpretations of how do we modify, stay in business, and yet social distance. The next one is a car wash, and that really triggers a whole story just about Hannah and I in our own personal adapting to COVID. That car wash is right next to a hotel. The hotel is Relax Inn, and it's in Brunswick, Maine. Our A plan put us in Brunswick, Maine, with the idea that we'd get off our train and get into a rental car brought to us by Enterprise. Well, all that worked. Enterprise shows up. Because of COVID, they don't just come and get you and you drop them off. They have someone else follow them to the site in a separate car. So there's two drivers and two cars. We're ready. Our luggage is in the car, and they denied us because we did not travel with a credit card. We only had a debit card. There's nothing we could do to reverse it, so we changed plans, canceled our night in Bar Harbor, and stayed in Brunswick because we had already missed the last train out of Brunswick. And so my point about COVID is we probably would have made this a little more traumatic in our experience, how we experienced this inconvenience, and how we had to shift from A plan to B plan. Because of COVID, we shifted peacefully and quickly. The trauma experienced from watching our A plan dissolve and our B plan form was not traumatic. Now, this parking meter is tied to COVID, and just the fact that the tech solutions that we have really equipped us better to deal with COVID. So here it is. So the parking meter is a great example. You don't have to deal with coins, you just have the app. But when you're a visitor, you have T-Mobile, and T-Mobile data is almost non-existent. Well, it is non-existent throughout Bar Harbor, and existent in mountainous places and really odd places where you'd expect to have no cell phone service at all. All of a sudden we have cell phone service plus significant data. So great idea. The tech helps deal with COVID, but it's premature to declare it a total success. This is to remind me of talk about our hotel. This is where we stayed the majority of the time. Now that Irish flag kind of looks like an Italian flag. That is not there to represent my wife, nor is her Japanese heritage with the Japanese flag. We are both there under the American flag. So listeners, just a word of advice. Where you're from in COVID is not where you think you're from, where you feel your childhood, where you identify where your loyalties and your best memories are. Where you're from is where you live. If, for example, if my childhood was in Massachusetts, but yet Hannah and I live in New Jersey, I made the mistake of telling someone I was from Massachusetts. It would take me a while to convince them that I was allowed to stay in the state, because in the moment, no one from Massachusetts is allowed to visit Maine. Secondly, the hotel has a maid service, a housekeeping service, that does not allow the housekeepers into the room if you're staying consecutive nights. So if you're in one day and out the next day, the travelers would never even notice this. But if you're there a week, like Hannah and I were, this is significant. You fill out a form. Each day when you leave, you use a magnet, you put it on the door, and the housekeeping staff leaves you the replacement supplies. The idea of not having someone in the room is great. I once worked in the hotel industry, and I know from personal experience that the number of people in this country, in the United States, fired for a false claim that he or she stole something is not zero. That number is actually probably in the tens of thousands of housekeepers who have been accused of stealing something they didn't. So, for example, trash getting taken out every day. It was so imaginable that something of value that the tourists, the guests are consider value ends up in the trash, and then the housekeeping people take it out in the trash, and now all of a sudden it's gone. Is it stolen? Yes. If the if the guest decides to accuse someone of stealing it, then it's stolen. It's really a significant problem for both the guests and the housekeepers, and to not have housekeepers in the room to everyone. Now, by chance, I mentioned the athletically primed trekker who would want to climb, and I specifically mentioned Precipice Trail and Bubble Rock Trail. For all visitors, an alternative to Bar Harbor would be Northeast Harbor and Southwest Harbor. Much less there. If you're going to stay extended time and you're not going to get bored with the same like pizza place and restaurant for multiple nights, it might be a great choice. And finally, the tech on this video, if this audio is longer than any I've ever done, I'm almost up to 30 minutes now. If my tech cooperates, this will be assembled on an Android phone, and I've done this only by having the space between each of the photos being an increment of 10 seconds, and that corresponds to a simple put pictures with audio app that I've downloaded from the Android App Store. I am recording this on one phone while I flip through the pictures on Hannah's phone. So the pictures remain on the original phone that they were taken, and I'm doing the audio on another phone. That the phone that now holds the audio will have to get the pictures so it can assemble this slideshow. And the selection and curating of these pictures was done on Amtrak between Portland, or still en route to Boston. This has been Tom Duty, middle-aged American living in New Jersey near the Lincoln Tunnel. If you were to visit my website, you would type Howdy Doody into Google. You'll find the correct spelling of this famous puppet. You then combine Tom Duty in a Google search for my site. Thank you for listening. Have a good day, good evening, a restful night's sleep. Ciao.